doesn't he feel naked up there?
I think he's just trying to be, like you say, and relate to the younger crowd. I mean, that's what Stephen Furtick does as well, is relate to the younger crowd, I think. And I think that's where people are trying to. I think, Alan, you're saying like the church is kind of the younger is where they're having problems keeping the church. So I think they're probably, probably two gentlemen that feel like they're doing a service because that's where the church is hurting the most.
I suppose. But it just bothers me. It might sound superficial. I watch Matt Chandler and him flailing his arms. I think this guy used to be a mime for a living because that's what he looks like. He looks like he's miming. And
All right, so would you rather see the guy flail his arms, or would you rather see the guy's eyes roll back into his head and he smiles?
right, I guess so.
When do you prefer?
What I want to do is I want to see Matt Chandler, like somebody cut the mic and put hip hop on and just watch Matt Chandler while the hip hop music is going. I think that would be really funny because that's what it looks like he's doing.
That's a good idea. Put ominous satanic music in for Rat White and see what that looks like too.
I'm sure someone's already done that.
Chris Roseborough.
Do you remember like when the first your conspiracy theory videos started showing up on YouTube? Like every third video would have that same ominous exact same music as the other video.
Whose video?
Oh, just every video. You pick any conspiracy video from like 10 years ago or shortly after YouTube opened up, whenever that was.
Well, you don't have to worry about that now because the most conspiracy videos are gone.
Yeah, I think they're kind of dwindling them out.
Mine's still up.
Every video on the Jesuits is.
I thought it was the Catholic Church that was the.
That too. Well,
I don't know. I think everyone's just trying to do their best, though. They're probably saying, "Look at these Bible study people." Which they're not.
There's only 20 people watching us. I think we're going to be okay. We won't. At least if we're wrong, we won't have that much to be judged by.
There's also stock. So you have these stock music things where you don't have to pay royalties. That comes from there. You also have stock video. So if you look at some of these health and or office productivity videos, you see the same guy just constantly.
Yeah, a lot of those like motivational videos, they pay a fee to get high quality footage, and then
even Thomas DeLauer, he has the same stock video footage that you'd see in other things as well, but it's the same guy.
Yeah, the one thing I don't like about motivational videos is, I mean, I do like it, but I'd like to see more. They're always about sports, showing what you can do in sports. Well, how about the person that's like, doing good in the office, or the person that's coming up with a Nobel Prize, or that came up with the latest cure for this, or they're helping individuals at the hospital, or a nurse or a doctor or a fireman. It's always about sports. Well, why do we always got to glamorify sports like that's the main thing? It just seems like they could do a better job of representing people that maybe aren't as talented physically as, include the mental people as well. And not to say that firefighter nurse isn't physically capable, but not to the extremes, I guess, as maybe some athletes. It just seems there could be some balance there. I do like those motivational videos every once in a while.
I thought about doing that. Actually, today I thought I could make a motivational video.
Yeah, I'd like to, but they're pretty challenging, and there's a lot of competition out for them. I mean, there's a lot of competition for anything these days. You know, if
I
you want
wouldn't
to be,
do it. Yeah, but I wouldn't do it to compete, you know.
yeah, but you know, everyone wants to have their whatever they're doing received well. I would think, you know, unless it's just an outlet for like creativity, which I like doing that. So, did we want to read anything? I know you wanted to go through Romans, Matthew.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean, have we done that? We haven't done that anytime in the recent past, right?
It's been a couple of years.
A couple years. Did you guys do it before you met me? Did you go through the whole book or any portion of it?
Twice.
Did we?
Twice.
Before you guys met me and I introduced that idea with the older, younger, and Jacob and Esau, how would you have read that quote from Malachi there, Romans 9? Because there in the Calvinist debate, you basically have two interpretations there. The Calvinist says that, you know, God loves some and hates others, and that's what the Jacob and Esau thing is about. It's about individuals and how, you know, God picks individuals. But the non-Calvinist says, no, that these are about nations, you know, because Jacob is Israel and Esau is Edom. But neither interpretation makes any sense when you try to, you know, put it into the context.
You're right. You have to look at it with the Hagar lens.
Mm-hmm. But it's a very ironic thing to have Paul. I mean, I think he's using three analogies there. Basically, his main point is Israel was blinded and they're going to be, you know, they're going to be done away with except for a remnant. Dispensationalism stops a lot of people from reading that properly because they think to themselves, well, what do you mean Israel's done away with? That's impossible. That's God's people, you know? So they can't imagine that. Therefore, they can't see what Paul is trying to say because it's blocking them. But if you can see that Israel was about to be done away with, except for a remnant, then you can take Paul at his word for what he's saying. Israel was blinded. They didn't get what they sought after. And so salvation go to the nations. And then you can see the analogies that Paul uses, the three of them. It's, you know, it's Isaac. First, it's Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael isn't named, but he's definitely referenced. And then Jacob and Esau, and then Pharaoh. And all three, Paul using all three references to be a type of Israel. But in the first two, only one of the men obviously is a type of Israel. Ironically, it's not Jacob.
Speak of the devil.
Wow.
The Pharisees. It's the Pharisees.
What's
Just
up?
kidding.
That's
Just kidding, Albert.
Yo, what it do?
I heard an interesting thing about the Old Covenant and New Covenant about Judah and his children. That was it. Let's see. Basically, he had been walking the streets and found a lady of the night, and that was gonna pay her, but he didn't have any money, so he gave her like some rings and stuff. And then he went back to pay her, and people are like, "What lady of the night?" She basically tricked him into, having a baby, and so then he was going to have her killed, and he's like, "Oh," she's like, "Well, you're the father," and I was like, "Oh, well, you're more righteous than me," he says, and then the children come out. I can't remember their two children's name, but the law was that you had to have you had to marry your if your brother's wife, if your brother died, then you had to marry the wife and have a child with the wife, your brother's
Carry on the
wife,
bloodlines, right?
to carry on the name.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the babies, whoever was the firstborn of the baby would carry on the name of the dead brother, and then whoever was the secondborn would carry on the name of the regular, the biological dad.
Right.
Well,
That's true, but
anyhow,
I'm pretty sure the priest didn't have to do that. But go
well,
ahead.
no. So what happened was the one baby sticks his arm out. He's coming out first, and the lady ties a little scarlet thing around his arm or leg or whatever. And then the other baby grabs the baby, pulls the baby back in, and it comes out first. And so, and the one, the scarlet comes out second. So the one that had the name of the brother who died, he's the old covenant, and it dies and goes away. And then the other one's the new covenant, if I got the story right.
While we're talking about covenants, and Zach, we had just talked about Esau, I've hated, but Jacob I loved. And since you tend to look at things with a Calvinistic lens, could you interpret that scripture for us, please, in Matthew?
Romans 9,
It's
something or
Romans
another.
9, yeah. I mean, I would
I
imagine
don't
you
think
already.
you heard Matthew's explanation, and before he gives it,
No, I know his explanation. He said it's covenantal. It's not individual people. It's a old covenant, new covenant thing. Am I right? Like, for example, Pharaoh would represent Israel and things like that.
Yeah, well, what I was saying about the dispensationalist, which we don't have any here, but for 20 years I read this as a dispensationalist. I would never see what I see now because the dispensationalism would stop me. It would make me think, there's no way God is casting away his people, Israel, and if you don't see that, then you can't look at why Paul is using Pharaoh and Jacob and Esau and Ishmael and Isaac as analogies. But preterists should be able to read this and see what Paul was doing, because the whole context is how Israel fell. So salvation go to the nations,
And after that, I got another question for you, Zach, since you haven't been around in a while, and I know you've been really busy with school, so I appreciate you doing well with your school, putting that first. That's good.
Yeah, oh, it's fun.
It's fun. You sound like
No, it's terrible. I wish I knew how to do this stuff.
you're doing good with it,
I'm
though.
almost halfway done. I got
Yeah.
one more 8 week. Like, this is my last week for my classes that I got now, and then I have two more classes that last 8 weeks, and then I'm done. Well, I'm gonna do summer classes too, but
What will your new classes be?
I have an education class, and then
You should like that, I would think.
yeah, and then we're talking about Romans. I am doing a class on the Book of Romans.
Oh, then you'll be really up to speed.
Then I'll know the real
that
thing.
already. I thought you had to do that already. Didn't you do Romans?
No, I did Acts.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about recently. I'm talking about like towards the very beginning you did something.
Mm-mm. No, I mean there are other like I've done like surveys of the New Testament, but this is 8 weeks strictly in the Book of Romans. I've only done one other class that was strictly like one book, which was Acts.
No, this is all online though, right?
Yeah.
So basically, they've got like a curriculum that you have to follow, and then like do
Yeah.
studies and.
Every week you have a particular task, particular reading assignments and videos to watch, and then there's some type of assignment. It could be a discussion board forum where there's like an answer, and then you post the answer, and then other students in the class respond to it, and then you have to respond to theirs. And you kind of have like a little dialogue there.
You have to respond so many times to get so many points or whatever.
So,
Yeah,
so is their way more efficient of teaching, or is ours?
Well, I mean,
they got a curriculum.
I mean, the thing is,
We don't have no curriculum.
I've obviously learned way more here than there. I mean, I don't even really know what I've learned so far. Like, actually,
Yeah,
like, wow,
see, so we win. No curriculum wins. Woo!
That's because
But again,
school
this is
kills the love of learning.
well, not necessarily. It's I guess I've already like learned a lot of like the Bible already, so I'm like it's just like refreshment, like going over something I've already heard before. I mean, there might have been some things like within church history that I didn't know about, but I mean, is that like major? I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm trying to go into a career of teaching, so I guess it's good to know some of those aspects, but I mean, I don't know.
What's your goal with all
sorry.
this?
To be a teacher at a college.
Okay, a Christian teacher,
Yeah.
Christian college.
Like I go to a Christian university now. It's Liberty University.
You have to have the resolve of Ken Hovind, the fire of
Donald Trump.
Steven Anderson. You have to use all pastors. The knowledge of come on, help me out. Don Preston, you gotta
You gotta get them all in there.
But I don't know,
Nah,
man.
you're doing good. What do you
guess.
think about? I don't know if you want to answer Matthew's position or Stacy's question first, and I'll throw another thing at you, or if you kind of already did, I don't know.
I kind of got lost there. I don't know what was happening.
If you give me like 20 minutes, I'll be able to answer one question.
Gotcha. No worries. We can.
You got to go do dishes?
And now I'm still trying to finish up some stuff and post some stuff. And I was like, what I'm doing, I don't necessarily have to give it my full attention. So I was like, all right, let me come on here and kind of listen to what y'all are talking about.
I was gonna tell.
You're not giving it your all. Oh my goodness.
I was gonna tell you, Alan, that I was looking at that Good for News Matthew gentleman, and he was showed me a couple stuff that I hadn't seen before in Revelation, and after I saw that, I was like, oh, I can see Alan's view a lot better now than I could. I didn't see the Good for News view like he wanted me to. I mean, I did get what he was saying as well, but then I was like, oh, I can see Alan's view now a lot better, because you just think the 1,000 years is still to come, right?
Well, I think we're in the 1,000 years right now.
Oh, you do think we're in the 1,000 years? Okay, so then you'd be the same as. So you think we're in the thousands of years?
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
I did notice that one video where you commented on him, asking him if you had a couple of things you wanted to add, but he said no thanks.
Right. I was
he
like,
was he was kind about it, and he was kind of short with it, but he was like, no thanks. I'm not going back to full predator, no matter what you say. So.
right. I'm like, okay, well, I mean,
So
If you're
that
gonna
says
be
that
big,
speaks volumes. I
yeah,
will not ever go back or believe that. You're
mhm.
saying it doesn't matter what the truth is.
Yeah, that's the way I take it too. I'm like, well, if you don't care one way or the other, if you're not willing to change,
Mhm.
Well, he used to be full preterist, but he's been.
Yeah, I mean, I get that and all, but I mean, it seems like it'd be if someone, could show you something in two verses that could possibly, change your mind. And the funny thing was, as I went to another one of his videos and I was like, oh, these are the exact two verses I was going to show you. And he started right off with those verses. But then he said that you might be interested in this, Zach. He said that Daniel 12:1 is only talking about Israel. And so when you look at it, it does say Israel, basically.
Mhm. And
So
who is this?
well, that's what I was gonna run by you, but I can wait till you're done with whatever you got
Yeah,
doing.
just give me like
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Had you ever seen that before, Alan, in Daniel 12:1, where Zach will give Zach some time, where it says thy people shall be delivered. It doesn't say like, everyone in the world or
What I've always said. That's always been my stance. Is that Daniel 12 is talking about Israel. Well,
gotcha.
well, anyone that remember, anyone that believes is so yes, it was a time of judgment on Israel.
And so that I think you've probably seen some of those Matthew videos. He was saying that there's a judgment coming on the nations, but
That's right.
Yeah.
but
Were you here for my rant?
nah, he wasn't here for your rant. But what I was saying, I think the problem with that comes into is the short time for Satan, basically, because I think the short time. Trying to think how I'd define that, or how I could help. Let's see. Just a second. I'll let someone else go for a little bit. I'll be right back in a few minutes.
Don't make me call out a chapter and verse.
Why? Which one would you pick?
You already know that's dangerous territory asking that question.
What would you
I
guys?
don't want to make everybody leave.
What would you guys? I got a question for everybody. Being that we're all preterists, what would you all say to the dispensationalist that accuses you of being a replacement theology person?
No, we're not. Absolutely not.
I mean, what exactly means by that? Because I would say Israel is replaced, so I'd have to say yes.
I would say, what triggered you?
You're not replacing them. They're conjoined.
Uh-huh.
The two men became one. So how can you be replacing them? That's just I think that's a straw man. People
Oh,
try to
it
use to
is.
shut you up.
It's
Huh?
definitely a straw man.
What's that?
is definitely a straw man.
Yeah.
But they don't understand why it's a straw man.
No.
They literally think that we believe, that the church has replaced Israel.
Yeah.
But I would say to them something totally different.
What would you say?
In actuality, replacement theology is true, but it's Jesus who replaces Israel. And if you say that to them, you could jog
That
something.
doesn't make sense, though. I mean, Jesus saves Jesus.
No, Jesus takes the place of Israel, doesn't he? He becomes the light to the Gentiles.
He's his firstborn. What is it?
He
Firstborn
is,
son.
right. In
God's
Exodus
firstborn.
4:22, it says Israel is God's firstborn.
Mm-hmm.
But then it says that Jesus is God's one and only son. What does that say for Israel? It says they get kicked out. They're unadopted, in other words. So if Israel is unadopted and Jesus is the son, well, he's taking the place as the son. We become sons of God through the body of Christ. So Jesus is the real replacement of Israel.
They go on the.
Well, there was a remnant still, so you don't totally have a full replacement.
Yeah, but these things are just thematic. They're not like, they don't play out. They can't play out literally. You know what I mean? Like take the theme of the older son and the younger son. We see, like in the parables, Lazarus and the rich man, the reversal, where Lazarus represents the Gentiles, the rich man represents the Jews, and there's a complete reversal. But that's not, it's just teaching something. It's not going to be that no Jews now going to get saved from now on, and only Gentiles are going to get saved. It doesn't work like that. It's just it's a theme that's happening, like with the younger son and the prodigal son. The older brother gets angry and jealous. The prophecy about Israel and the younger son becomes found. He represents Gentiles. So
Makes perfect sense. I mean, like, why all these things? You have to think why.
Yeah,
This
in
makes
theme,
perfect sense.
thematically, Jesus takes the place of Israel. He becomes the light to the nation. So all the prophecies that seem to be about Israel and about Israel's king, David, turn out to be all about Christ. He's the replacement. My God, why have you forsaken me? It seems like God forsook Israel. So Jesus becomes Israel. God forsakes, but then Jesus rises from the dead. Now he's in the new covenant. So I would say to the dispensationalist, Jesus is the replacement of Israel. He's the one who followed the law to a T perfectly, didn't fail. He walked the footsteps of Israel and did it in a way they couldn't. And it's like it's played out in Isaac and who am I thinking of? Ishmael and Isaac. So Ishmael, the older son, when he's 13, is thrown out of the household of Abraham. But Isaac, God tells Abraham to take his only son up to the mountain. Well, what happened to Ishmael? He's not considered Abraham's son anymore. That's the picture of what's going to happen with Christ.
Because isn't she like the son of the bondwoman, and the bondwoman is a slave, and a slave is
Right. Galatians 3 explains
not his son.
the depiction. Yeah.
You can carry that about Jesus being the true Israel a little further, because a lot of the dispensationalists will say, well, God's made these promises, and he will not renege on those promises. They have to be fulfilled, and you can say he did fulfill them. He fulfilled them for the one who was able to obey the law, which was Christ.
Right. So he's the replacement of Israel, and then we get adopted because of him. He gave us the right to become sons of God. But if you
That's a
go
great argument.
if you go into Romans with that thinking, then you can understand what Paul's getting at. He doesn't want to come out and say blatantly, because he loves his kinsfolk. He's sorrowing for them because he sees that they're not believing the Messiah. He, to the point where he'd give up his own life. So he kind of beats around the bush and says, the plan of God is brilliant. It's, I'm going to make Israel jealous so that Gentiles get saved, to possibly provoke some of the Israelites to salvation again. But he knows it's only some of them. Unlike the dispensationalist that thinks they're all going to get saved, because of Romans 11, 25. So all Israel will be saved.
Yeah, all of which Israel? Because
Well,
there's many Israels now. You have old school Israel, you have the fake school Israel. Yeah.
But I think what Paul's getting at is that we become the Israel. Jesus replaces Israel, but then we become. The word Israel is used so many different ways, like you just said. First it's a guy's name.
Yeah, that's really all I'm trying to say. Like, which
Yeah.
one are we talking about here? Yeah, it's that kind of thing. Yeah, I'm totally with you 100% on everything that you just said. Because, yeah, that's correct.
I think that's the key to Romans. So Jacob I loved, Esau I hated, or the older will serve the younger. If you read that kind of in isolation, you're thinking,
Yeah, then you'll be like, why did he hate Esau?
yeah. But God gave Edom a blessing too. It doesn't make
Yeah,
any sense.
he's like, yeah, don't take their land though. Like, he's your brother, but exactly. Other verses are forgotten. They see one verse and they're like focused in on it because it fits their paradigm, but then they ignore the other verses that completely shatter the possibility of their paradigm. At least that's what I see.
It is tricky though, and I've done a search for like Romans 9 videos and watched just about, maybe not all of them, but watched at least some of all the ones that look like they might touch on it, and I haven't found that view. Even among non-Calvinists. And sometimes I think, am I completely off base? Because no one else has that view that I know of, that I've found. But when
Well, you're a little weird, Matthew.
I guess so. And when you read it in that light, it's like, no, it has to be this way. It just makes the whole thing make sense.
Yeah. It's when you have those little moments where you're like, no, like this is like literally the only way it can be read. Like,
But is there?
I see how you can misinterpret it and whatnot, make up other things, but no, this really is the only way that it's like.
So how many scriptures do you have to pull together to see this, Matthew?
It's a good deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good deal. I mean, you have to know the story of Abraham. at least fairly well.
Yeah.
You have to know that Israel was God's firstborn. You have to know their history of,
So how many script? So if you actually count how many scriptures or pieces of the Bible that you have to pull together, know the whole story of this, pull this in, it's quite a weaving.
yeah, I suppose so. I really would love to make a video on it.
Well, do
And-
it.
You just did. Keep going.
Yeah, no, I mean,
We're
like,
doing it right now.
no, like, I mean, really, I'm just going through it quickly because we're just chatting about it. But
Yeah.
like, really, like a detailed,
Yeah,
Because we know
definitely.
what scriptures he's talking about, but somebody that doesn't would
That was
need
when I
all of that
ordered
kind
them.
of-
Yeah. Everybody's got to ask you a question. What were you saying, Lori? Sorry.
I don't remember.
Fudge.
It's an introduction to the Esau Jacob typology.
Hmm.
Even when he quotes from Malachi, if you read it, you could see, if you have the covenantal lens on, that it's a prophecy about the new covenant. I think Gentiles or nations are mentioned. But if you could see that interpretation, like if a dispensationalist would forget about the debate on preterism versus futurism and just listen to that teaching, it could sway them. Something could, you know what I mean? Like, that's another reason why I have to pull it together. And I started writing about it. And I think you have to write first. Before you make a video like that, you definitely have to write it out. Like you're writing a long article or something, or
Hmm.
like you're writing a book. And
You
then
have to have your thoughts in line for sure.
get all the thoughts in line, and then translate it into a video.
Yeah, some people are really good at doing that. Others, not so much.
No, and I find it daunting. I started it, and I'm going to do little by little. That's how I work. I can't sit down and do, for more than an hour.
I think you'd get a lot of action if you did it. Like, I think you get a lot of action on your channel.
Depends on how you name it.
Well, yeah, titles are important.
Got to be that clickbaity title.
You gotta
Why
challenge people.
Trump is the Antichrist.
Right.
Jesus is coming back again tomorrow. Yeah.
You could just make stuff up like there's going to be 8 blood moons in the near future. That'd do it.
Oh yeah. But you have to give me $20 or I'm not telling you all of it.
Right. That'd actually probably be a good marketing plan right there.
Absolutely.
Tell
Tell them half and then hide the rest until they pay up.
Yeah, and then you can tell them their magic number when they pay.
Yeah. Just kidding.
Right. And then we won't hear from Matthew for 10 years.
Yeah.
All
What
right.
would you make if you have 100,000 views on a video? What do you make off that, Rob?
Probably nothing.
Nothing?
Maybe like $300, $400 maybe. Just depends on the ads. No, just all time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Like if you had 100,000 every month, then yeah, but depends on the ads too. Certain ads pay more than others.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I saw this one video that they had posted, they're pretty fairly decent sized YouTube channel, and they have some videos, and they showed you how much money that YouTube paid them for videos with about like 2 million, 3 million views, and it's like $1,100, $1,200. But
That's it.
kind of like what Rob was saying, it takes that one video they posted a year and a half ago, so in a year and a half's time, they've gotten $1,200. You
How
know,
many?
and just to record that video, they needed the lighting, the camera, the computer to upload. I mean, that costs way more than $1,200. So,
So
like
did
what Rob was saying, you really got to post a lot.
did you guys? So that guy that retired Marine or whatever he was that posted that video the other night from Iraq because Trump issued an executive no travel ban or whatever, and Iraq was one of the countries. And I guess so. He's talking about. I think I want to say he had 144. It just went viral. 144 million views.
Really?
Yeah. Anyway, what he was saying is that he is in Iraq, and the Iraqi people are extremely upset that he's chosen to pick on them, sort of thing. And he said, so this guy said to these Iraqis, he said, "Hey, now what would happen if I went out into the town square as an American right now?" And they said, probably you would, within an hour, be beaten and probably beheaded in public and put on video. And that was just the average Iraqi, not ISIS or anything. And so he said to the Iraqis, if you're going to treat me like that, he's just working over there. He's not a Marine at this time. And he said, if you're going to treat me like that in your country, what makes you think we should invite you to our country so you can do the same thing? And whether it be one person or many. And anyway, so by morning, he woke up in the morning. I can't remember. I think he had 14 million views or something on it. I can't remember. And they actually had to take him out of the country because his life was threatened. So I thought it was quite interesting how a video like that can go so viral so quickly. Aren't you guys proud to be Americans?
Mhm.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that story. That just happened recently.
I think it was this last week or so. Great big dude too. Big long black beard. I don't know how they thought he wasn't an Iraqi. Maybe the skin color. Yeah, just type in ex-Marine. Talks about Iraq. So if that went on his if that went on his YouTube channel, what would he make off something like that?
If it wasn't demonetized?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't
That's
see
the thing.
YouTube
A lot of
because
controversial things get demonetized, and I watch a lot of gun channels and stuff like that, and they don't get paid really, unless you make videos of men wearing
But
makeup and stuff like that.
transgender.
But I mean, I have one friend that has. I mean, his YouTube channel has 80,000 subscribers, and he says that he used to make they used to pay really good money 2 years ago, but he says that it's gone down 2/3 of what he used to make.
Yeah, I could see that. YouTube wants more of a take now that they're popular, right?
Yeah, I mean, I
And
guess
I
they
heard
just have
Reddit.
different.
I heard Reddit is now not only deleting you as a user for any right-wing chat comments, that kind of thing, but now even if you upvote, you're going to be you lose your account.
Yeah,
I don't know.
crazy.
Sounds like superstition to me.
What's that?
That they'd be just kicking you off for an upvote or something like that, or making a comment. And I mean, that's what Reddit's all about, having different little subgroups of different little ideas. So
Mostly if you're left-wing, though. I think because they actually posted it, Rob. This is not a conspiracy.
I mean, a lot of these companies are like that. I mean, Facebook. I mean, there's so many big YouTube channels that have been like silenced because
Oh,
of their
absolutely. Look at Alex
political
Jones.
views.
The thing is these tech companies are innovative, and the innovative ideology goes along with progressive,
Yeah.
so it's just a natural order of things.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you talk about like free speech, but these companies, like because they're like a private entity, they can set their own rules pretty much when it
Yeah.
comes to particular speech. But it is fascinating. I mean, there's no problem with posting stuff about transgender or whatever, but when you talk about, Trump or Jesus, it's kind of just like get shut down.
My boys are
I
avid.
mean, look at YouTube. There's tons of people preaching about Jesus. I'm not buying into that.
I mean, it's
I wouldn't
already
say it's so much
it's-
Jesus. I would say it's
And I'm
more
not saying
anti-left.
the anti what?
Left. If you're an anti-left, if
No, I
you're
mean there's pro-Trump people on YouTube too. So I think we got fake news going on here.
oh,
no.
I think
Do
you're
you
gonna have
do
to
you
look up
think?
left and right channels and see who was deleted and who wasn't.
Yeah, there's already been like proven cases of major YouTube channels that have been shut down or silenced.
Yeah, but what were
Who
they
chooses? Who
saying
chooses
though?
what's the truth? I mean, okay, I'll just
They're
look at Alex
pro-Trump.
Jones. Look at Alex Jones. Just give me an example. He's been taken off Twitter, iTunes, YouTube. What else is there?
He needed to go. Come
I'm
on.
just, yeah, but whose opinion is that?
He should have free speech to say what he
He should have
wants.
free speech. I'm sorry.
Right.
It's
You can go
America.
out on the street and speak.
Yeah, but the
Oh, so
see,
but as long as he's not on the forum you're on.
No,
I mean,
I
they do that. They do that right off the get-go for the presidential elections. Only certain people are invited to the debates.
you don't
Even though,
understand. It's not the content that I have a problem with. It's the sound of his voice.
Oh,
So
for
if you
Christ's
don't have a good speaking voice, you should be banned and blocked. Period.
Well, I totally get it, along with James White.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But, so, I mean, why is he off all forums, Rob? Just curious.
well, I mean, it's not something I really want to talk about and being recorded, but I mean, to me, there's definitely a reason for it. I think he had a lot of things that weren't true is why he got in trouble. And then he had some things that were true. And I don't think those were the things that were getting him in trouble. I think it was the things that weren't true that were getting him in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't know. It just seems like we've gotten away from talking about the Bible the last 3 or 4 things. I keep trying to go back there, but it doesn't seem, not to be offensive, but it doesn't seem there much interest lately.
Oh, I hadn't
What
realized.
was the question you had for me earlier?
I was saying the
Daniel 12 or something like that.
well, not only that, but Revelation, like the partial preterist view, I guess now is that one I hadn't really heard before is that okay, Daniel 12 and Revelation, basically up to 20 is all judgment for Israel, and that Revelation 20, verse 7 and forward, basically is a judgment for all the nations. Basically, the whole world type thing. Had you heard that before at all?
I mean, I guess, some people do say, like, I guess Israel was judged. Matthew chapter 24 was all about Israel. That all happened. And now we're still, like, the partial preterist view pretty much is that.
Yeah, they're saying Matthew 25 is the future, basically.
Yeah,
And it does somewhat kind of make sense where they're coming from, because in Matthew 25 it says it'll be a long time before he comes.
but what's interesting is when you look at Matthew chapter 25, it talks about the kingdom. Let me see real quick. Let me see. Yeah, so verse 31. So it says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. So when does this happen?
Yeah, that was my point too. Because if
I
you
would
go to
say chapter
Matthew 16,
24. And
27,
that
and
one,
28.
yeah, exactly. So that's the biggest thing. I don't think you can separate Matthew chapter 23, 24, and 25. See, a lot of partial preterists and people would separate and say, yeah, Matthew chapter 23 and 24 is the judgment being done on Jerusalem, on Judea, and the Jewish leaders. But then chapter 25 is something different. This is the end of it all. But what's fascinating is woven within all this is the coming of the kingdom, the coming of the Son of Man in his glory. And it just to be consistent, it's happening at the same time. Jesus doesn't come 3 times, he only comes twice.
Why do you think it says long time in or after a long while or whatever in Matthew 25?
I guess that's like in the perspective of a man, maybe. I mean, I've
That's what
seen
I'm
that.
thinking, maybe.
It is a parable, so I wouldn't put like too much emphasis on the little details, on every detail that's found within them, but the overarching like whole
Well, there's more than
message.
just that one, because like Matthew brings up where he goes into a far country, kind of like the gospel going more than just Israel.
Yeah, no, the gospel did do that, and it didn't happen right away. I mean, when Jesus
Mhm.
said these words in like 29, 30 AD, it wasn't fulfilled until the very late 50s, early 60s. That actually, because again, you read Paul's earlier letters, like for example, Thessalonians, where he's speaking, saying like, hey, don't believe that the day of the Lord has already come, because he hasn't come. The end hasn't happened until the falling away occurs first. And this was written in around 50, 51, 52 AD. So Paul's isn't saying, hey, the end is near, it's not now. But then when you read his later epistles like Romans or Corinthians and things like that, now he's saying, hey, the end is near. We're in it's like it's happening. The gospel's been preached in all the world.
Yeah, I can definitely see it being a man's perspective and it going to all the world, like Paul said.
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing is in Matthew chapter 24, one of the major signs is the preaching of the gospel to the ends of the world, because it says in verse 14, it says let me just go to it right quick real quick. So it says, and this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, then the end will come. So before he's saying all these things like, hey, watch out for these rumors of wars and earthquakes and certain things like that. And he'll mention that, hey, that the end is not yet, and then the other things have to take place. But the major sign which indicates when the end can actually come would be the preaching of the gospel in all the world. Because that would be a sign that would signify, okay, now it's ready to go. So that's why when you look at the older letters in the New Testament, now you can see James, John, Peter, Paul, they all say that the end is near. And they all said this in the 60s. Maybe Paul said it in 59 in the book of Romans. But in the very late 50s, early 60s, you have all 4 people testifying that Jesus is about to come. James says that the judge
Well,
is
they say the
standing at the
second
door.
coming. They say the second coming happened in 70 AD, but then they say
Yeah,
the
another
judgment for the
coming.
nations is in the
Yeah.
future.
Well, the thing is how I would say is when you look at Acts chapter 17, here is Paul speaking to Gentiles, saying that God has set a day that he's going to judge the world.
So you would say all
So,
the nations were gathered at that
so
second coming.
because I look at Revelation chapter 3, and in Revelation chapter 3, there is uh, talking to the church of Philadelphia. So in Revelation chapter 3, verse 7, it says, "And to the angel of the church of Philadelphia, write these words of the Holy One, the true one, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one will open." So this was written to the church of Philadelphia, which we would all agree was a church in the first century, but it was not in Jerusalem. Would we agree to that? That these churches, and because
Oh,
the
the
churches in
churches,
Asia,
yeah, the seven churches.
yeah. Hold on, I'm trying to find the particular verse in this chapter. Hold on, let me verse it for you.
They were just the Southeast Asia circuit.
Okay, so right there, verse 10. So we can agree that this was written obviously before 70 AD. This was written sometime in the mid 60s, maybe early 60s, and it was written to a church. Where did you say, Stacy? In Asia Minor, right?
Yeah, the Southeast Asia circuit.
And how far from Jerusalem? Would you call it Judea?
No.
Okay, so no. So that's what I wanted to hear. And now when you look at verse 10, it says, "Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to try those who dwell on the earth." So, what is the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world? What is that? So, if we can agree, and these people you're speaking to would, Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 through 6 is 70 AD, but verse 7, it breaks, and now it's some future event, which is the whole world. So, up to this point, they would agree that, okay, this is 70 AD, Jerusalem, all this has to do with that. But this church in Philadelphia was, because they were a good one, I guess they were good, that, you know, God was going to keep them from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world. And again, the Greek word for whole world is oikumene, which is the same word found in Matthew chapter 24, verse 14, where it says that the gospel will be preached in all the world, oikumene, and then the end will come. And that's the same word found in Acts chapter 17, where Paul says to the people in Athens, saying, "Hey, God has set a day that he will judge the whole world."
What do you think about, because they always point to 2 Peter 3 about where it says,
Mm-hmm.
the whole world will be,
Yeah.
or actually, I misspoke there, but
Yeah. Yeah.
because
I know
it
you're talking
says,
about.
it uses cosmos for the
Yep.
flood, but then when it uses for the fire, it uses gi or gay, however you want to say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, Gi, Cosmos, all those things are the main focus point that I kind of look at is the word element. So for
Yeah,
me,
I
I
know
see.
that view, but I was wondering, do you think
Yeah.
gi could mean just local Earth too?
The thing is it mostly is translated as land in
Right.
the Bible, but the problem is that there's some places where it is used as in the earth. Like I
The
think,
full Earth.
yeah, but
Okay.
again, just like cosmos means the whole world,
Yeah, I
but
knew that.
cosmos can also mean people.
Right.
Jesus is the propitiation or for the whole world. It's not for the trees and the mountains and the moon and the sun. It's for the people that he's died for.
Mm-hmm.
So and again, the word ktisis, which is creature or creation, in Mark chapter 16, Jesus says, "Preach the gospel to every creature." That doesn't mean you're supposed to preach to ants and mosquitoes, bugs, slugs, and whatever. It's to the people. The humans are the creation. So it's,
Yeah, yeah.
again,
Just like
these
it says another
words.
time. Beasts of the field,
Yeah,
trees in Eden. Like these are all metaphors
yeah, it's
describing different
humans.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, you have, Acts chapter 10, the different animals, the creatures, the creeping things, but it's humans. So, you have these Greek words that, yes, isolated in a particular context can mean the world, it can mean the land. But when you look at it in these contexts of judgment and all this kind of stuff, see, the problem is in Revelation, most of the time where, people read it and it just says, look at that, 1/3 of the whole world and it's going to be destroyed and all this stuff. But there it uses the Greek word "gi," which is mostly translated land. So it should just say land, because again, most preterists would all agree that it's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. We only debate further in the later chapters, in chapters 20, 21, 22, but we can all agree the earlier chapters is referring to the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, around that time period. But it still uses that same language of the whole world. But again, we all know it's not literally the whole world. It's the land of Israel that was being, kind of
Right.
messed up.
But some people would say it has to be the whole world.
Yeah, no, of course. But that's the problem is they're looking, I guess most people that say that probably have heard of the perspective of preterism, but never really gave it too much thought. I mean, it took me years to really wrap my mind around it, and
Yeah.
it's this topic's not something that somebody can jump on fairly quickly, especially if they're like a astute Bibles person. They're not just a regular Sunday churchgoer. They've studied the Bible. They know, you can give them a particular topic and then they can actually go to the Bible and find it and do all those things. They're most likely indoctrinated with the futurism stuff. So it takes time to kind of break away those chains, the chains that can be, kind of holding them down to a particular viewpoint. But at the same time, I mean, it's just trying to be consistent, with the Bible. I mean, we need to realize that the Bible was not written to us, it was written for us. So how would the people that receive these letters understand these letters?
Yeah. Well, I hope I wasn't too rude, Lori. I just concerned that if we get to talking about those subjects too much, that will end up like one of those channels you say. But thanks, Zach.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've been kind of consumed and not really into the Bible too much the past couple of weeks, to be honest.
Kalima. That will get your heart.
School has just been ridiculous.
Isn't that the
School's
Raiders
always
Lost
ridiculous.
Ark or something, Albert?
Yeah, that was. You're good. Good. You knew the reference, but I think actually it was the other one. It was the Temple of Doom or something. 'Cause
Yeah,
Raiders
Temple of
Lost
Doom.
Ark
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
is the one with Shorty.
Yeah.
Shorty being Zach, right? And are you Dr. Jones?
I saw a bumper sticker that said Jones 2040, whatever that means.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
But yeah, you do way too much school. You better be super smart when you're all done. Zach.
He already is super smart.
No, way Pinky in the Brain, brain times 10.
No, I don't really. I mean, to be honest, man, I think I'm wasting my time doing this stuff.
You better
It's
go
just so much-
Kaioken
it's
times
just-
10.
It's just so
Super
much information that I feel like I don't know how somebody in
How
my position.
long to before you're finished?
Well, so in 9 weeks I'll be a junior.
Oh,
So
okay.
2 more years. But what I would like to do is to keep going and then get my master's, but I don't know.
Well, just
As long
get
as I
involved
can-
in a church somewhere. Well, I guess you want to be
Yeah.
a teacher at a university.
Because
more
of the
than
money,
a
to be
preacher.
honest, that
Yeah.
would be the main reason to be a professor at a college because they get paid a lot more. But I mean,
Than a
even if I could
preacher?
find it, well,
I mean,
I don't know if
preachers
they're
make pretty
preach.
good money depending on how good you are, I
Where's he gonna
think.
preach though?
Well, the thing
Yeah, that's my problem. I don't know what I'm
Where are
gonna
you gonna
do.
preach? What are you
Yes.
gonna
I
do?
don't
Preach
know.
futurism?
I don't know. It's ridiculous. It's
Well, the
stupid.
thing
Nobody's
is
gonna
that,
hire you if you're a preterist preacher. You'd have to build your own church.
No, seriously.
scholastic institutions like
It's got to start somewhere.
What's
No,
up,
I can
Stace?
teach. I can teach like an Old Testament survey class. Like I'd be down to teach like some random like, okay, we're gonna go through the book of Exodus or whatever.
So basically, you'll teach the whole Bible except for Matthew 24, Daniel 12, and
Yeah, New
Revelation.
Testament. Yeah, yeah. No, I could, but I could probably just be very. I mean, because I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life.
Oh, you're doing good. You got a family. You're providing for them. You're studying. You're doing your best. You can only do your best. You're doing that.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Stacy?
I was going to say that scholastic institutions like you to follow a particular protocol or they sort of look down.
Oh, if you're not far left in Canada, you don't get a job.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about they prefer you to get your undergraduate degree from one institution and then for you to get your master's from somewhere else. They don't like for you to have your master's and your doctorates from the same institution that you got your undergraduate degree.
Yeah, that is kind of true. They kind of like that balance. But then, it does seem like there is a curriculum that they want you to follow as well, that you don't get to create your own curriculum too much. There's a little bit of you don't have full leeway, but
Yeah. I don't know. I'll probably just.
But I mean, you'd probably enjoy just, teaching whatever. At college, you don't necessarily have to teach full preterism.
Yeah, I mean, I've had classes of, like I said, like surveys of the Old Testament. That would be kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't know. I'll probably just.
You
come
could
up
probably
with
present like all views. And so, like here's the different eschatology views. You could have a class on eschatology that would, as long as you're presenting all views and not your own biased.
I think you have to
particular.
teach what they tell you to teach, don't they?
Yeah, that's what I've noticed. Like, especially like
Yeah.
my teachers in school, it's just pretty much like the main like heads of the department say, okay, this is what you're going to teach, and then you have these other professors just kind of like going. They just grade the paperwork.
It's like creationism. You can't really teach creationism in most public schools. There may be a few that are starting to allow it more, but majority are going to teach some type of evolution.
Oh, for sure.
Big Bang
What I like
Theory.
I like about my schools, I'm going to take a class about like literally like creation. I'm pretty excited for that. So it's like a biology class, but not broke down evolution stuff.
But go ahead, Stacey.
Being a teacher, you have to walk the straight and narrow for 10 years, and you get what's called tenure, which then after you've been there for 10 years, then it's very difficult to get terminated. So unless you do something blatantly stupid. So, you start to teach a little bit different maybe, or, different things, but you have more stability.
You
You
think
can't get fired when you got tenure in Canada.
you think preterism will catch on in like 100 years from now?
It is catching
Dude,
on.
I'm about to be the dean of preterism at Liberty University.
Have you been sharing it there?
Heck no. I mean, I've actually one person I had said something to, but nobody ever replied.
The dean? You told the dean that?
No, it was I forget. I think it was the Book of Acts class where we were going through the first like week's assignment was, because in Acts chapter 1, it's like, oh, are you now going to restore the kingdom to Israel? So the question was like, I can remember it. It was something about the king. Like, is there going to be a physical kingdom for Israel in the future? And the textbook says yes, because it was written by a Jewish guy. And then I'm just like, well, the kingdom actually was already established, and all that other kind of stuff. And
What's everyone think that means by he's going to come like a thief in the night? I know Stacy's thought on that, which I thought was pretty interesting.
well, I
What
mean,
is
I
your
think he
thought,
comes.
Stacy? Go. Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, it seems like according to like unbelievers, that catching away or that whatever would be to them would be like that, because it says in Thessalonians that that day would not come like a thief in the night.
Huh?
Because let me pull it up real quick. Where is it? Thessalonians, something like that. Yeah, 1 Thessalonians 5. Oh my God. So it says, now concerning the times and the seasons, brother, you have no need to have anything written to you, for yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will not come like a thief in the night, while people are saying, there is peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor
What version
pains.
are you reading?
That's the ESV.
I've never heard that before. I switch over to it. You're looking at 1 Thessalonians 1:5.
Can you post that,
Yeah.
Rob?
Or maybe
Yeah, I
it says,
can.
yeah, it's just for you yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night, while people are saying, but it says, there's peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains comes upon the pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you are not in darkness, brothers, for that day to surprise you like a thief. For you are children of light, children of the day. We are not of the night or of the darkness.
What are you reading, Zach? Sorry, I
First
didn't hear you.
Thessalonians 5.
Okay.
I read verse 1 through 5.
Man, I lost my glasses.
Right. So what would you say that means then?
Well, I mean,
The opposite
it
of what
was,
everybody says.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, it seems like it was for. It seems like the robber was going to take something that they wouldn't know. So maybe, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely not something. When I look at Thessalonians, it seems like, well, hey, it's not going to be like a thief to the Christians. They'll be prepared. That, like, again, like you look at church historians, like what's his name, Irenaeus, I believe, wrote that the church in the first century, not one Christian was just killed in the destruction of 70 AD
So
because
I
they
mean,
heeded the words.
seems like the thief is coming for their souls, basically, is what it's coming from. I mean, then that wouldn't quite fit your definition, would it, Stacy? Because then, then it's still like tangible or visible. We were kind of thinking maybe like a thief in the night comes like unnoticed.
Uh-huh. I'm looking something up real quick.
Okay.
I mean, like, I think like the Christians could have seen something, but not like a physical thing. I definitely don't believe that the non-believers really saw.
Right. They didn't see it coming.
Yeah, but the Christians knew it.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that the word thief there is kleptes, like we get kleptomaniac, an embezzler. The name is transferred to false teachers who do not care to instruct men but abuse their confidence for their own gain. That's a thief.
What verse is that, Stacy?
5:2. So if you're comparing, children or sons of the, being aware and of the day versus an outsider thief in the night, you make a comparison in context there, then when you are saying peace and security and destruction falls on you, he did come like a thief in the night.
Yeah, he comes in a thief in the night for the unbelievers, but then for the believers. But it seems like it would still be
Well, I think you're making the presupposition, the thief in the night, that you don't know until you wake up in the morning that
right.
the thief was there, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not necessarily the case. A thief
Mm-hmm.
can come and invade your house at night, and you put up a fight, but you were not expecting that, so it was sudden.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think that might be the more way we should look at it. I was wondering, a question for you, Alan. You're talking that there's probably a rapture catching up, and it seems like, there's definitely verses to support that. But then we have verses that say Israel's children, we're going to go on. And if they're caught up, how could you have children? I could see, if it was just dad and a mom and a child caught up, I could see that. But then I don't see how you could have children if they're all caught up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think at that point you're talking about those that are spiritual Israel. All of us that have believed since that time have our children, of the consummation of God. We're the offspring, so to speak, of what they began. So I don't think it's a physical, literal having children. Uh, it's more of a continuation of the gospel. But as far as the thief in the night and all that, I think to me it's important to make a distinction, because when it talks about the thief in the night, it's definitely talking about the return of the Lord in judgment. But often, and most, I haven't met a parish that doesn't do this, but all parishes that I've met combine the two of the catching away, or the rapture of the bride, and the judgment of all of Israel, the resurrection of the just and the unjust. They see that as one event, and I see it as two events. So the bride, yes, is going to be ready, and they're going to be caught away, raptured, resurrected before the general resurrection of the just and unjust. And I believe that the Bible teaches that with the different harvest that God prophesied through His feast. But when he's talking about His church or His bride, He tells them, when you see these things begin to happen, look up your lift up your heads, look up, for your redemption draws nigh. And it says in Revelation that the 144,000 are in heaven before the destruction of Mystery Babylon. And these are those that were redeemed from the earth. These were the true virgins, those that were faithful. This is the church. This is the bride. The parable of the virgins speaks of 5 foolish and 5 wise. And it talks about the foolish ones that didn't have the oil. They're going to say, Lord, Lord, open up to us, let us in. And He'll say, surely I say to you, I do not know you. I truly believe that during that time, as a bride of Christ, you had to be faithful. In other words, you had to put your trust and faith in Christ. If you turn from that, you could lose your place as the bride. The husband will not marry an unfaithful bride.
What would you say for Matthew? Go ahead.
I think it's talking about two different things, and we try to combine it all in one, and it's difficult. So the thief in the night is definitely referring to the judgment. He's coming as a thief in the night to judge Israel.
What do you do with like Matthew 25:10 where it says the door was shut, or what does that mean to you?
Matthew 25:10.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, when Jesus came on Pentecost in 70 AD to capture his bride, if after that, it's too late. You can't be his bride. It's done. But see, judgment and resurrection of the rest of the dead did not occur until Tishri 1, Feast of Trumpets. So all of these people that used to be saved, used to be the bride, but were unfaithful, they would be those saying, Lord, Lord, let us in. No, sorry, I don't know you. That's how I see it.
It was, the next parable makes sense to me, but the foolish virgins doesn't quite make sense to me because in the next parable, it seems like the reason you're not let in is because you're not sharing the gospel. Because you're given these 10 talents, 5 talents, and a talent. And it seems like the talent is basically just to share Christ is what the talent is. But maybe someone sees something different.
I know that any tree that does not bear fruit or any branch that does not bear fruit will be cut off. I see it kind of related to that.
But what makes you a foolish virgin, whatever?
A foolish virgin, to me, it speaks of someone that used their spot, their place as the bride, and oil represents the Holy Spirit, but did they quench the Holy Spirit? Did they go against the commandments of God? I don't know exactly, but I definitely believe that those between 30 and 70 could definitely lose their place as the bride if they weren't faithful to Jesus.
What do you think about today, Alan?
Today, I don't think, because I don't believe we're the bride.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're the children of the consummation, and as a child of the King, once you become a child of the King of that consummation, you're always a child.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, I think God's consistent. I think it comes down to trust and belief. It has nothing to do with what you do or how much you do. Do you trust and believe in Jesus Christ? If you abandon that, I don't know. I tend to believe that you could lose your salvation based on your belief. There's a lot of atheists that used to be Christians, and they no longer believe. So, are they still saved because they once believed?
Maybe they never actually believed.
And that's what people say. But if you were to talk to them, they would say it. I was just like you. I was pastor of a church. I was passionate. I was witnessing. I believed.
Mm-hmm.
But then, they started believing a lie, and then slowly they abandoned their faith.
But you do go through different periods in your life. I mean, everybody does.
Right.
Where you don't know what to believe. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, and like for me, like right now I sit on a fence with almost everything I believe, but God knows my heart. He
But you
knows
believe
that I want the
Jesus died on
truth.
the cross. You believe Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead.
Yes. Well, I don't know, like I am pulled between universalism, not so much Israel only, but I can see parts of it. But I think, if you were saved by faith in the Old Testament and you were saved by faith in the New, I just don't see the difference.
Right.
Like if you have to perform in the New, be saved. You know, I just, like I say, I'm just being honest. I definitely am struggling, and God knows my heart, and He knows that, you know, I know there is a God without a doubt. Do I know the exact truth? I don't think so.
Yeah, and all we can say is continue seeking him, because he
Yeah,
will,
absolutely. Oh, I have no doubt that He'll show me.
because he knows your heart. He
Yep.
knows what you can do. He
But I'm not
promised.
going to live in. I'm definitely not going to live in fear of, um, you know, I don't believe enough, or I don't do this enough, or I'm not good enough, or you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to live like that.
Well, and and lordship salvation kind of puts you in a box like that. People that
Absolutely.
that
And that's
they,
what I was raised with, or not raised with, but that was my whole Christian walk, right?
you always live in fear because you don't know if you've
Oh,
done enough, if you've sinned too much.
yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what? I think it was the preaching for me. Every Sunday I left thinking, man, I just don't think I'm going to make it, Lord. It's just not much hope for me.
Right. I was the same way.
Yeah, it was huge self-condemnation. And it was so subtle, you know? You didn't even notice it. You left feeling like crap every Sunday, so you just got used to it. So you started to avoid it.
Hmm.
They're supposed to tear you down and then build you back up.
Yeah, like the Marines.
It's for me, it's just like churches. You got your little churches and you got your big churches, and then be nice that it just doesn't seem like the churches are really helping that many people. They're more either got a little study group, or they got such a big church that they have so much overhead that the overhead's going to entertaining the masses compared to helping the masses. Not to say they don't do a little or a quarter of help, but most production goes to entertaining the Sunday crowd, then, and some of it's encouraging the Sunday crowd as well, which is good. But it seems like in the 50s and 60s the church was more of a lending hand to those that needed help than
I think that was also your neighbor was like that too. So maybe this is
right.
a sign
It
of the
wasn't just a
times.
church. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah, good point.
Well, I went to a Sunday service, and what did I take away from it? Satan is there to steal everything from you. What else? Oh, read out the budget for the year. They were short 200,000.
Oh, really? Sounds like one and the same.
What else? But that was the message.
Yeah, I get tired of Satan being the blame for everything. It's like, all right, come on now. I think it's just like almost. I mean,
Well, what was interesting is he was contradicting, because he was talking about how Satan had ruined his week, and every day it was something new, and then it wasn't like 10 minutes later he read a scripture about Satan. What is that scripture about Satan being under Christ's feet? Or under our feet or something. And I'm thinking,
mhm.
you don't even know what you
You
just
mean-
read.
Trampling Satan under our feet. Yeah.
Right.
The guy didn't even understand what he just read.
I didn't realize that he was contradicting himself.
No, not at all. And I know, I mean, if I didn't have Christian fellowship with you guys, that's it.
Well, it just
Yeah,
seems
no,
like
it's
that they really don't want to look into the Bible that much. They're just enough to get the Sunday sermon in a lot of times. You know.
Almost like works do something for you. Like, oh, I'm going to church though. Like, I went to church. It's like, yeah, that doesn't do anything for you.
I think church can be good, but just like, if it's, you got to be, every church is different, But I mean, in the first century, they were meeting daily in the church, although I think the Catholic Church has daily mass. That's
But
my understanding.
they were commanded to as the time drew near, right? Forsake
Were
not
they?
the gathering of yourselves together,
Mm-hmm.
even more so as the time draws near.
I
Does it
just
say
thought
something like that, or?
Something like that.
that I'm not sure. I
What's
mean,
that?
it
That
definitely
means don't.
Sunday
That means
service
don't stop.
is something that's added. The way that it's functioning and way that it is, because like, yeah, it's true. The church met daily. That was their life. That was their friends. I mean, that was their everything. But now it's kind of had like switched. Like Sunday services, that is it. Nobody does, for the most part. The big churches, they don't really know the people there.
Well, that and with today's society, like Lori mentioned, I mean, today's society is different. You got to work. And then if you got a family, your kids are involved in maybe sports or band or 4-H or, something. So now, time, or then you got a lot more things to entertain you. So your choices are a lot more than they were,
I mean, they had
just 20, 30 years ago.
When I was a kid, you had a Sunday morning service, you had a Sunday night service, and you had a Wednesday midweek service. And now a lot of churches don't even meet in the middle of the week. And there's 5 different local churches, and they'll all get together and they'll have one of those churches do a Sunday night service. So each
Really?
doesn't have to do a Sunday night service except once every 5 weeks or so. And yeah, so, but used to everyone would do it.
I was surprised that the Catholic Church does daily mass. I don't think very many people go, but I guess they're supposed to go to
What they
daily
do here,
mass.
they go to daily mass.
Do they?
Hmm.
I guess all Catholic churches have daily mass, is the way I'm taking it.
I think so. Oh, and I did check into that, Lori, about the Catholics not being able to have Bibles. And he said that's completely wrong, that his grandmother, this guy's in his 70s, and he said his grandmother had a Bible and she read it all the time. And there was that's completely false.
Maybe it's different in different places, because I'm pretty sure that's what he told me.
Yeah, I think I went to my local Catholic church maybe like 8 years ago, and there weren't any Bibles in the pews, like some churches you go to where there's a lot of Bibles like underneath a chair and stuff like that. But they did have, the reading, the day's reading that you could follow along. But they didn't have but I can understand maybe that, because sometimes those can be a distraction. Well, you pick it up, well, then you're not following along what they're teaching. But it's been a while since I've been. I had thought about going this Sunday to the Catholic Mass, but I ended up going to the later one, to the Church of Christ. That's when I talked, I don't know if you're on earlier, but I talked about, were you on, Stacey, when I was talking about Judah having children? And the Old Covenant and New Covenant, where they tied the little band around the first kid and he reached his arm out, another kid reached in, pulled him back in, and they came out in the reverse order.
Yep.
Stacy, if you look online and just put in when were Catholics allowed to read their Bibles, there's a lot on it.
Okay, but this guy's a practicing devout Catholic, and
Yeah.
he's never heard of it.
Yeah.
And the fact is that his grandmother had a Bible in their home, and she read it. You know,
Hmm.
I did hear something interesting, if I had it right, that, we were talking the other day that like some are allowed to marry and some are not. They were saying that it had somewhat to do with the blending of the opening of bringing the churches together a few years back, that they were saying that because those individuals, their livelihood was preachers, and that they didn't have, any training really in anything else other, that it wouldn't be fair to them to change the rule that they couldn't marry. And so they allowed for some exceptions, which that makes sense. If I explain that any halfway good, I may not. You still awake, Matthew?
Yep.
Somehow, by a miracle, yeah. Just kidding.
Have you been bored, Albert?
I was just kidding. I just tried to, wake everybody up.
Were you thinking, what do you think about those foolish versions? And Matthew, did you have a take on that?
I would say because it's a parable and it's still a little bit, clouded. I don't know.
Mhm.
I think all right. So what is the thing God was looking for? It says in like Amos, Jesus talks about the parable with the fruit. He looks for he looks for good grapes. He finds nothing but wild grapes. So it could be a reference to the good fruit that God was looking for in Israel, but I don't think it's all that specific. I think it's basically just meaning that they don't do what they're supposed to do. It's either going to be fruit or it's going to be their task to be a light to the Gentiles that they're not doing.
We were talking about this before you came on, but does it make sense that God would come and have judgment on the whole world? I mean, especially the Christians. And why would he wait to a certain amount of time to have a final judgment, like a certain day? Is there like 10 billion non-Christians, so now I can kill the most that day? Or
No, I think you have to wait because the new covenant basically begins in the first century.
uh-huh.
So now you have a new covenant. If there's a judgment in the old covenant, there should be a judgment in the new covenant. The promise is different. It's a better promise, and the criteria is different. Now the criteria is faith. So
Right.
where if
I mean,
there's only a judgment old covenant, where is the judgment for the new covenant? Was it rolled up in the old covenant judgment? I don't see it that way.
I see what you're saying. You're saying that their 70 AD couldn't be a new covenant judgment.
Right.
Well, why would you have to have a judgment for the new covenant? Why can't you just have a judgment individually? Because if you have judgment at one single day, then what's the difference in between having judgment, especially for the people that have already died?
I mean, you could, I don't, maybe you're asking it the question the wrong way. I'm very specific with words. God could have made it where you have a judgment. I just don't think that's what the Bible teaches. I think, there's going to be a resurrection, of the just and the unjust. I don't see that in 70 AD. '70 AD is a destruction. And you can't say that it was the resurrection of the new covenant. That had already happened.
In what way were you thinking? Are you thinking about the one at the cross or whatever?
Well, the cross leading up to the day of Pentecost, when people begin to literally receive the Holy Spirit is the new covenant.
Yeah, but you were saying the resurrection. Are you referring to where they came out of their graves, or?
No, I'm saying there was no resurrection.
Oh, okay. I thought you said there was a resurrection or something.
Yeah. No, I don't see the resurrection. I see a destruction. I don't know how the full preterists can call 70 AD a resurrection. That new covenant was already in place.
What can you see that the people that were killed could possibly being, resurrected for a second death?
No, not there.
So they're just waiting for their judgment day?
Well, we talked about this question the other night. Do the people, if there is, obviously, if there is no future judgment, then the question is moot. But if there is a future judgment, then do the people who were judged in 70 AD get resurrected to be judged again? That I couldn't answer, but that's only if there is a future one. Have to kind of keep it
Right.
both ways in mind.
Because you kind of, if it did happen in 70 AD, do you see the possibility of a capturing up, a rapture at all, or not really?
No, I don't see that at all. It actually baffles me that anyone does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, you guys know, we talk
Matt,
about full preterism and partial all the time. But full preterism, I think, is basically coming out of futurism and then going a bit too far. It's over spiritualizing death. It's over spiritualizing resurrection.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any easy answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I would disagree a little. I think partial preterism just makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it's like Gloria is saying, like if you had to go by logic or sense, then yeah, partial preterism makes sense. But if you had to go by the scriptures only, then full preterism seems to be the answer.
Well, no, not just sense. To me, I believe that's what the scriptures teach. Naturally, I think it makes sense, but I think that's what it's literally teaching. Bodily resurrection all at once, 1 Corinthians 15. The doing away with heaven and earth, the literal physical heaven and earth, 1 Peter. Just like the days of Noah, the comparison is of the physical world. So I think the scriptures teach partial preterism, and I think it makes a whole lot of sense.
What did you think about what Zach was saying about 2 Peter 3?
Refresh my memory. He's talking about the elements, right?
Yeah, he kind of relates it to the elements of the old covenant basically being destroyed. But I was also mentioning that, it doesn't have to be the fire, even if it wasn't the elements, because it uses cosmos for the world when it talks about the flood, but then when it goes to the fire, it doesn't use cosmos anymore.
Hmm.
It uses land or earth.
Yeah, I think all that says is that you can't focus on those words and interpret it.
I mean, basically, that's what you're doing, though. You're using it to say that, well, if one meant that way, it has to mean this way. But
Yeah.
if they're using the word specifically, maybe that wasn't their intent.
Well, I'm saying if Gi and oikomeni and cosmos, if they're going to be used interchangeably, admittedly by both camps, then you can't focus on those words, is what I mean. You have to look at what's being compared. Like Paul is comparing, when the 8 were saved in the destruction of the earth in the flood. So compare that to this future destruction of the heaven and the earth. It almost doesn't make any sense. It's almost like you're forcing something onto it when you try to make heaven and earth there a covenantal heaven and earth. It doesn't compare any longer to the flood, which is talking about the physical earth. In a comparison, something's got to be the same. You're taking two things and you're comparing them. If the whole thing, if nothing's the same in either one of them, then there is no comparison. So what's the same in both? It's the fact that some people are saved and most people are lost.
Yeah, I just don't get how that works in a fire for the whole world, though. Because there's no saving.
Well,
Everyone's
yeah,
burned up.
I don't believe that I certainly don't believe that the people who are left are going to be burned up. No, they're lifted off the earth.
So, gotcha.
If you meet the Lord, if the dead in Christ rise first,
Mm-hmm.
and then those who remain and are left alive are changed and caught up together with those who are raised first and the Lord in the air. It doesn't say in heaven, it says in the air. Then that is a perfect opportunity for God to cleanse that earth and destroy it.
So that is a rapture.
That's a rapture, but it's also it's the resurrection.
It doesn't have to be. It says to meet the Lord in the air. It's saying that the Lord is the one who's in the air. It's not saying that you're going to be in the air where he is. Like,
Oh, sure it is. I think it is.
you can read it either way. It's just,
The interesting thing about that view, and what I think is also interesting when it talks about shut the door, is that in Revelation 20:13, it says, and the sea gave up their dead. And the verse before that says, and the dead were judged out of those things that were written in the books. And the sea gave up their dead. It doesn't seem to be judging anyone who's living. And that does seem to support partial preterism more than full preterism in some aspects.
Yeah, the great white throne is a judgment you do not want to be at. It says if you're saved, if you believe in Christ, you're not judged. You've passed into eternal life. You're not raised to judgment. You're raised to eternal life.
You don't think the great white throne's a separation of some getting eternal life and some getting damnation or whatever, or second death?
Well, in a sense, I'm saying the only ones judged are those that are being cast away.
It says you're judged according to your works, though.
Right. Right. If you don't have faith in Christ, you're judged according to your works. And guess what? Your works are as filthy rags. No one can be saved.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Once you believe in Christ, now your works do not count against you.
Exactly. But these people are being judged by their works because they did not have faith in Christ. So they have to meet the standard that Christ set for them, and they can't.
It has to be that way. Otherwise, they couldn't be judged. That's why Paul writes in Romans, how else could God judge the whole world?
Exactly.
Then if that's the case, then it's all talking about, then I'd have to say, well, that then it doesn't necessarily have to support partial preterism completely, because then you could say that those fit the bill in 70 AD. You know, they were trying to do it by their works.
You have to have a lot happening, you know, if in full preterism is true. You have to have a lot happening in 70 AD. The dead in Christ had to have rose first, and then all those who were left had to have been changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, and that had to be the last trumpet. Jesus said, I will raise him up on the last day. I know that preterists say, well, the last day is the last day of Israel. Well, that would be 70 AD. Now, Jesus said that about the apostles. All the ones that the Father has given me, I will lose none of them. And then he says, I'll raise them up at the last day. So if full preterism is true, then the apostles had to be raised in 70 AD. And as far as I can tell, they weren't resurrected.
What makes you say they weren't resurrected? And when you say, as far as I can tell,
Well, as far as a full preterist can tell, were they resurrected? Is there any proof of that?
how would you prove that?
Exactly.
I mean, how could you prove it either way?
Somebody would have
I
recorded
mean, how
that.
could you prove that it didn't happen, or how could you prove that it did happen?
Well, somebody would have recorded if people were disappearing, if Christians all disappeared, and full preterists are.
Yeah, but they never even recorded.
They're divided.
Nobody outside of the Gospels recorded the resurrection of Christ.
Well, no one recorded the temple being destroyed other than Josephus. Why didn't the Christians write about that?
Well, if you go back to the early church fathers, where did they learn from? If you keep going back and back and back, they learned from the apostles. They couldn't have done that if the apostles were raised up. And if the apostles were raised up, then those early church fathers would have been raised up as well, because they were also Christians alive at the same time. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I don't think they were alive at the same time. If you look at the church fathers, there was a gap there.
Right, but where'd they learn from then?
The books.
So there were no disciples of the apostles.
Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah,
As far as like the church fathers.
Yeah, I've done a study on that, and it does appear there's a huge gap. And all the history that tries to fill in the gap are the Catholics that have backdated their top teachers or their religious people of that time to validate their own religion. And so they would take their popular teachers of the time that they knew about, and they would say that he was he studied under this guy and this guy studied under John.
Mm-hmm.
So we get our word directly from the apostles. And the truth of the matter is, there's actually a gap of like Rob was saying, of like 100 years of just nothing.
So who do you think? All right, so let's follow this logic for a little bit. Who do you think the apostles preached to? And they preached to somebody. I'm going to assume that. I mean, Jesus alludes to that in his prayer, Gethsemane prayer. if they preached to somebody, then those somebodies, some of them believed. And so
Right.
if they believed, then they believed prior to 70 AD because the apostles were still alive, according to full preterism. They hadn't been killed yet and resurrected in 70 AD. They were still there. So then why weren't the ones that believed also resurrected? You'd have no Christians left.
Right. That's exactly what happened.
So that's the full preterist thought that they in 70 AD, all the
No,
Christians, according to
that's not the full preterist thought. The full preterist thought is those that were alive stayed there and continued.
Some think they were captured up. Some full preterists definitely think that.
Oh, okay. Most don't, but yes, I guess some there. But what were you asking, Matthew?
So in that thought, that means that there was a resurrection in 70 AD. And that means it was the last day that Jesus talked about. And that means all the apostles were raised, but not just the apostles, all the Christians.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
And there was a gap with no Christian preaching the gospel to anybody.
That's right. In fact, it explains a lot more than questions it causes, because I've always asked myself, how does a church who was 99% Jewish, dominated by Jewish thought, go from that to 0% Jewish 150 years later? And it's total heresy, Catholicism. It just made no sense to me. It just doesn't make sense.
Why do you think they picked it up though?
Because like Matthew said, there's people that heard the gospel that didn't believe. There's people that were enticed by it and didn't believe.
Oh, gotcha. So then eventually they're like, oh, let's look into this book.
And another thing, God will preserve his word. And he did. Now, we have a church history that spans 1,600 years of Catholicism, and that was all there was. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
I can't help thinking of the movie, even though I didn't watch it, we know the story, Left Behind. So what you're saying is that scenario actually took place in 70 AD.
Yeah, I don't think their clothes were neatly folded in the chair, though.
All the Christians disappeared.
Yes, all the Christians.
And then people just found the book. They found the Bible here, or they found the scroll here.
That's exactly what happened.
Man, I really have a hard time believing that.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I don't think people would have stopped searching for God, right? There's always that element of people that will search for the truth.
Well, especially, I mean, if they did disappear, you'd be like, oh gosh, what happened to Joe or Kate? Weren't they believers? They believed this book. Maybe I should take a look at it.
And no one has ever found any record of anyone recording disappearing of people in 70 AD, resurrection or.
Well, I know Zach mentioned there's a book about them fleeing to Pella, but I don't know what this book's called or.
That's not a rapture, though.
Yeah, as far as I know, it doesn't talk anything about being raptured, but I'm not for sure.
And you got to think of the times. It was total chaos, total fear.
You wouldn't know who was missing and who wasn't.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. If they all went to a mountain, say they all go to Mount Sinai and it's just Christians there, no one else is invited to the party. And if you get caught up, who's going to notice? You're 100 miles away from your nearest neighbor.
They would just think you're dead.
Right.
Because everybody was leaving, right?
Mm-hmm. Or, they went on a journey never to return.
Mm-hmm. Right, and if someone's missing, what do you think? Well, the Romans took them, or they died, from the war. They didn't have cell phones, they didn't have the internet. You don't know what's going on 2 doors down.
True.
You know what? I got a cell phone and the internet, and I still don't know what's going on.
Right. That's what Alan was saying, right?
So you can imagine that all those, but remember, this was not a surprise to them. The Lord warned them and told them when these things are going to happen, and that when these things begin to happen, look up, for your redemption draws nigh. They were ready, so they're very likely all together, and it's very likely Jesus came back to get them at the midnight hour, like he said. So if he came at night and they're all together and then they disappear, no one's going to know. No one's going to know.
I mean, it said he would stand on. Where did they gathered at Pella, which is, I don't even know how far away. Because it said he'd stand on the Mountain Olives when he returned, and it would split.
Well, that's the return in judgment. When he came to get his bride, it was not in judgment.
Well, the mountain's already split, though, it seems like.
Yeah, he came in judgment in 70 AD on Tishri 1, but he came to get his bride on Pentecost. If you from the taking away of the sacrifices, which actually caused the start of the war in 66, around September area time period, Josephus talks about it, and Daniel prophesies about it. The day count. It's very interesting because in Daniel 12, it tells you exactly when the church is raptured. It says from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. And if you study the Jewish war with the Romans, what actually caused the war was the high priest. They were making sacrifices for the Romans, and the high priest took away that daily sacrifice, and the people of the Jewish people begged him not to do that because they knew that provoked the Romans and provoked other people. And but he went ahead and took it away. And Josephus talks about that actually started the downfall of Israel. And if you count 1,290 days, it takes you exactly to when Titus shows up at at Jerusalem in 70, right at Passover. And then I believe the abomination of desolation occurred when John, one of the faction leaders in Israel, in Jerusalem, is when the priests opened up the doors and let all the people come into the temple. So he thought this would be a peaceful way of trying to, okay, let's come all together and pray to our God and defeat the Romans. Well, John used this as an opportunity. He slaughtered hundreds of people, and there's blood. I mean, the blood filled the temple. And that was the abomination. And it was exactly 1,290 days from when the daily sacrifice was taken away in 66. Well, it says in Daniel 12, it says, blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. Well, that's 45 days later. Well, what happens 45 days later? Pentecost. It's exactly Pentecost. So I believe that the church was raptured on Pentecost, which was 45 days after that abomination of desolation was set up.
What, so in 70 AD is the Pentecost? 45 days after the temple's destroyed?
No, 45 days after the abomination of desolation.
Okay, so, and the abomination of desolation happened just like a few days then before the,
Yeah, Titus showed up on Passover. But actually, I think what the abomination was when John killed all the people in the temple. It was done by a Jew, not by Titus.
When what?
But I believe there's several abominations that occurred. But yeah, John, one of the three leaders of, there's three factions in Israel, in Jerusalem at that time, all fighting against each other. And John when the high priest opened up the temple, hoping they would bring the three factions together so they could unite, he used it as an opportunity and he slaughtered a lot of people in the temple. Josephus writes,
Who did that?
John of Giscala, he's one of the faction leaders
Oh, okay.
of during the Roman Jewish War.
Huh.
But it's just interesting. The timing of it's pretty cool. And remember, in Revelation, it says, let's see. It says in Revelation 14, talking about the 144,000, which I believe is the bride that we just talked about, was raptured on Pentecost. It says, talking about the 144,000 in verse 4, Revelation 14:4, it says, these are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to God and to the Lamb. Remember, first fruits do not occur in the fall feast. First fruits are in the spring feast. And he just called the 144,000 first fruits to God. There were two first fruits feasts. First fruits feasts. Say that fast. And one of them was the feast of unleavened bread, which represents Jesus Christ. But then you also have the feast of Pentecost, or the feast of weeks. Those are the two first fruits: the first fruit of the barley and the first fruit of the wheat. So it's just basically telling you that the church is going to be resurrected and taken to God Pentecost. They're the ones redeemed from the earth. And then if you read Luke 21, it says that. It says, talking about all these signs about when Jesus is going to come back and judge, and destroy Jerusalem and all that. He then says, and this is the only time that he says this, it's not in the other gospel. He says, now when you see these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. When they begin to happen, see, they were taken before the end. And then when judgment came and Jesus stood on the Mount of Olives, that's when he resurrected everyone else. That's when he separated the sheep from the goats. That's when he resurrected the just and the unjust. That's what Daniel's talking about. That many came out of the grave, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting torment. That's what he's talking about there. The separation of the two resurrections. It's the feast, the harvest. God did that for a reason.
I think I need to do a study on the feasts.
If you do a real good
I don't know
study,
why we should, as a group, do a study on the feast. I think it reveals a lot.
it reveals the entire plan of God, Lori.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, I really need to do that. I
Yeah.
think that first fruits, that's quite interesting to me. The 144,000.
Right. And
That's
remember,
definitely Israel only. That's,
Yep.
Don't,
And remember
don't
the
you
parable
agree?
of the bride, the parable of the bridegroom and the foolish and the wise.
Yeah.
It's the bridegroom coming to get his bride. That's the parable. And what are they? They're virgins. They're faithful. They have their oil. That's exactly what it's talking about in Revelation.
Are you going to bed, Rob?
Yeah, start that new job, so I should probably get to
Oh,
bed. So
when do you start?
I started today. So
Oh, what are you doing?
car parts guy,
Oh, right,
basically.
right. And
Yeah.
what do you think?
It was like I remember it, basically. So it was a lot better than where I think I should be able to settle in. So it seems a lot slower pace and just casual, and not so crazy. So
Yeah.
definitely appreciated it today, but only day one, so it might be a little early to call the ball, but seemed like I remembered. So
Well,
it
I think
wasn't
looking on the bright side helps a lot anyway.
right. Exactly. Attitude can make a big difference.
Oh, attitude is everything.
Yeah.
I still want to
So-
go over the Enoch 10 weeks with you sometime.
Yeah. We
Who
should
else was
definitely go over
talking about
the.
that? Somebody else was talking about that. Who was it? Matthew?
Yeah, maybe. Are you going to be on Wednesday, Alan?
I should be, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can go over Enoch some.
Yeah, I think it proves that there's two judgments, two resurrections. And then
Yeah, it's been a while since I've looked into that, but wouldn't mind looking into that again
I thought that was an interesting book.
for sure.
yeah,
I know everybody says it's bunk, but
I don't think it's bunk. There's just too many things in it that there's no way man wrote this. There's just no way.
yeah.
Well, there's a lot of science in there too, so
Right. But there's so much prophecy as well. And there's just, only God can prophesy.
well, I'm gonna call it a night and hopefully catch your brothers
I
and
gotta
sister on Wednesday.
All right.
All right,
Okay, guys.
night.
Good night, Albert.
Lots of love.
Yeah. Good night.
Have a good day at work.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.